The goal of this video is to understand the science behind the beautiful colors of coordination complexes. First, we must consider the nature of light and color. The behavior of light is complicated, and sometimes it helps to think of it as an electromagnetic wave, and other times as a particle called a photon. As a wave, the color of light is defined by its wavelength. As a photon, the color of light is defined by its energy. These two values are indirectly proportional to each other by Planck's equation. As an example, red light has a wavelength of around 680 nanometers and energy around 3 times 10 to the negative 25th joules per photon. When light enters your eye, it stimulates light-sensitive cells called cones, which send an impulse to your brain through the optic nerve. To distinguish colors, humans have different types of cones that are more sensitive to different wavelengths. We have red, green, and blue sensitive cones. Our brains can distinguish millions of colors by interpreting the relative strengths of these signals. There is no single frequency for white light. Instead, white light is made up of photons of many different wavelengths. It appears white to our eyes because it is comprised of an equal mix of wavelengths from across the visible spectrum. We call this phenomenon additive mixing. When you add many wavelengths of light together, you get one color. For example, if your eye detects predominantly orange and green wavelengths, your brain will see yellow. We can understand this phenomenon by seeing how colors are arranged on a color wheel. Subtractive mixing is another model to understand what colors we perceive. This time, we look at what wavelengths are not present. For example, if our eyes detect all of the wavelengths of the visible spectrum except for blue, then we will perceive the color orange. Again, a color wheel can help us visualize this relationship. At this point, it is interesting to note that color is not perceived the same way by different animals. Some animals have fewer or more types of cones in their eyes. Even humans have diverse perception of color based on differences in their eyes and brains. A coordination complex is a compound comprised of neutral molecules or anions called ligands bound to a central metal atom or ion by coordinate covalent bonds. These compounds are pervasive throughout chemistry and our lives. Natural examples include vitamin B12, the heme group in hemoglobin, or chlorophyll. Synthetic complexes are used across many industries, from mineral refinery to pharmaceuticals such as the anti-cancer drug cisplatin. The valence electrons of free transition metal atoms are organized into d orbitals with the same energy. In a transition metal coordination complex, the d orbitals of the central metal atom interact with the electron cloud of the ligands. Due to the arrangement of the ligands and the arrangement of the d orbitals, some d orbitals are impacted more from this interaction. This leads to differences in their energy levels. Crystal field theory can predict this energy difference, depending on the characteristics of both the metal and the ligands and their arrangement. When the d orbitals are not completely filled, electrons can move from one energy level to another. When a photon from an incident light source impacts an electron in a low-energy suborbital, it can promote it to a high-energy suborbital. However, this can only occur when the energy of this photon is equal to the energy difference between these orbitals. Other energy photons are reflected. Because of this, a specific wavelength of light is absorbed by the complex, while all others are reflected. To summarize, nearly all frequencies of an incident light source are reflected from the coordination complex, but depending on the species of the central metal atom and the ligands around it, and their geometry, one frequency of light is absorbed and therefore not reflected to our eyes. This is where the concept of subtractive mixing comes in. We can use a color wheel to know the color that we will perceive based on the color of light that is filtered out by the complex. This complex filters out blue light, and therefore it will appear orange.